still so many unknowns around this virus.
Not only will America dig itself out of this hole they put us in, we're going to build back, and we're going to build back better.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Costa, a national political reporter at the Washington Post. We're continuing our coverage of the Democratic National Convention. This afternoon, my guest is independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, the former Democratic presidential candidate, the longest serving independent in congressional history. Senator Sanders, you spoke Monday night. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Senator Sanders, your speech and President Obama's last night called President Trump a threat to American democracy. That was a theme running through both of those remarks. Is that breaking through at this convention, that idea?
Well, I surely hope it is, and not just to the convention, but to the American people. Bob, you have a president who just within the last week alone sent out a tweet which said in so many words that if I, Donald Trump, lose the election, it's because the election is rigged. Now stop and think for a moment what that means. He is behind in every national poll, and that doesn't mean that he can't win. But it means that he is behind. And what he is saying is if I lose, it's not because I really lost the election and I'm going to leave office. It's because it's rigged. And if it's rigged, I'm not going to leave office. That's the implication of what he said. And that is just an extraordinary statement from an American president, which is completely undermining the very fabric of American democracy. And this is a guy who has, within the last month, talked about delaying the election. He has literally talked about not leaving office if he loses the election. So anybody who does not think that this election, as President Obama said last night, is about maintaining the very fabric of American democracy does not understand Donald Trump.
Senator Sanders, you're in Congress, you're in the upper chamber. What will you do if President Trump tries to delay the election or refuses to concede, should it be clear that he's been defeated?
Well, I can assure you that there are people who are thinking very, very hard about that almost unthinkable crisis. I mean, Bob, here we are talking about something that I think very few people before Trump would have ever imagined that we would be talking about. Who would have thought that, Bush had lost the election? He would say, well, I'm not going to leave office, or Obama or any other president would be saying that. So I can assure you that there is right now very serious discussions about what will happen if we have a president who loses the election and refuses to leave office. But this is what I will say to the American people. Look, this is clearly the most important election, not only in our lifetimes, but in the modern history of America. And it is absolutely imperative. And you heard all kinds of speakers in the last couple of days making this point. We may disagree about policy issues. All right. I have my agenda, a progressive agenda. It is different than Joe Biden's agenda, different than Hillary Clinton's agenda, different than John Kasich's agenda, different than Colin Powell's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you're seeing throughout this country is people are saying, you know what? We will fight about our agendas. We'll fight about our ideas. We'll fight about healthcare and education and climate change after Biden is elected. But right now, we have to get this president, Donald Trump, who is a menace to democracy, whose irresponsible attitude towards science, his rejection of science has cost us tens of thousands of lives in this pandemic. His rejection of climate science threatens the future of America. God knows what's happening in California as we speak, and the entire world, who is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, a religious bigot, who is a pathological liar. So what you're seeing right now, Bob, which is really different than any other campaign I have ever observed. It's not a debate just about healthcare or education. It is about the very fabric of American society and whether or not we maintain the democracy that so many brave Americans fought and died to preserve.
Senator, I just want to come back to something you said. You said there are serious talks. How serious are those talks? And what exactly are your options as a U.S. Senator?
No, let me leave it at that, Bob. I mean, we can go
Why
on.
so coy, Senator Sanders?
Not being coy, Bob. We are talking
Well, I mean, I'm
about
curious.
very,
I'm curious about what do those
Bob,
talks look like?
we are
That's all.
talking about very, very serious issues. What we are talking about is what happens, God forbid, and I'm not saying it will happen, but I and a lot of people are fearful about the possibility of it happening. What happens if somebody loses an election and refuses to leave the Oval Office? What do we do? Well, there are people, all I will tell you right now is there are very serious people thinking about that possibility. It is astonishing to me that anybody in this country has to think about it. We're not a third world country. We're not a banana republic. We assume that we have free elections and the results of those elections are binding. The winner takes office, the loser loses office. That we are even thinking about that is rather appalling, and that tells you about the state of this country under Donald Trump.
What do you think a Trump second term would look like, Senator Sanders?
I think if he won the re-election, he would simply be more cocky, and that all of the anti-democratic policies and actions that he pursued will only be magnified because he will say, well, the American people support what I'm doing. And I think you will see even more xenophobia, more attempts to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation. I think you will see more reactionary policies with regard to the economy. This is a president who you will recall during the 2016 campaign, he said to the American people, I'm going to provide health care to everybody. I believe in the working class of America. We all need health care. And then he proceeded to try to throw, and is proceeding today in the courts, trying to throw 32 million people off of the health care that they have. And in addition to that, do away with the protections that we managed to fight for pre-existing conditions. This is a president who campaigned and said, I'm a different type of Republican. I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Obviously, his budgets called for massive cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, education. This is a president who refused to support extending what we accomplished in the CARES Act so that millions and millions of people today who desperately need that $600 check that they were getting, well, under him at best, and I don't even think he can pull this off, and certainly not every state will be involved in the program, will get $300 and not get that $1,200 extension for every American. So, this is a president who lied, who turned his back on the working class. Under a new administration, I believe it would all be worse.
Senator, what would you like to hear tonight from Vice President Biden? Would you like to hear him explicitly underscore his support for a public option? Anything else like that?
Well, I think, that Joe is going to have to make the case, and he's certainly prepared to do it, as to the absolute necessity of moving this country in a very, very different direction than Trump has led us. But I think the speech cannot simply be, hey, we got to get rid of Trump. I think what the speech has got to deal with, and I think Biden understands this, is there is so much pain in America today. As a result of the pandemic, as you know, tens of millions of people have lost their jobs. And Bob, you got people out there in my state of Vermont and all over this country who are wondering how they're going to be putting food on the table for their kids. These are millions of people who are worried about being evicted from their apartments or losing their homes because they no longer have any income. These are people who don't have any health insurance. They may have symptoms of the coronavirus. They can't even go to the doctor because they can't afford to do that. So we have right now an unprecedented series of crises facing this country. I mean, the crises are the pandemic and the Trump administration's failure to deal with it effectively because they reject science. It is the economic collapse, the worst since the Great Depression. It is climate change, and we're seeing what climate change is about right now in California and elsewhere. So we have an enormous amount of work in front of us. And what I think Biden has got to do is to tell the American people, not just that we're going to get rid of Trump, that he understands the healthcare crisis, that he understands the crisis of climate change, that he understands that people cannot live on $8 and $9 an hour, and they're going to have to raise that minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, that workers have the right to join unions, that women deserve equal pay for equal work, that kids should not have to go $50,000 or $100,000 in debt simply for trying to get a college education, that we have got to. Now, Joe and I clearly disagree on healthcare. I absolutely and firmly believe in Medicare for all. He does not. But his plan, his credit, greatly expands healthcare coverage. His plan is prepared to take on the greed and irresponsibility of the pharmaceutical industry, which charges us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. So, bottom line, I hope that Joe will talk about those issues relevant to working people who are struggling today, as well as tell us why we need to get rid of Trump.
Senator, you just outlined all of these crises that affect the country. You also probably heard earlier your former colleague, Ted Kaufman, U.S. Senator, he told the Wall Street Journal that it could be difficult to have a large increase in federal spending in 2021. He blamed the deficits. He blamed the Republican tax cuts. So when you're talking about this massive federal response that's needed to address these crises, you then have Senator Kaufman saying maybe it's not entirely possible. What's your reaction to the senator's comment?
I very, very strongly disagree with Senator Kaufman. This is a moment, an unprecedented moment in the modern history of this country, where the United States government, and certainly I hope that it will be a democratically controlled Senate, democratically controlled House, and I hope Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be president and vice president. But if we can do that, what we have got to do is respond to these crises, respond to the pain of the American people. As you know, Bob, my campaign worked with Biden's campaign on 6 different task forces dealing with the major problems facing America, from the economy to healthcare, to climate change, to education, immigration reform, criminal justice reform. And while, we didn't get everything we wanted out of those proposals, nor did the Biden camp, the proposals were fairly progressive. In fact, if those proposals were to be implemented, as I have said repeatedly, it would make Biden the most progressive president of the United States since FDR. Now, those are the proposals we worked out. And I expect that if he is elected president, those are the proposals, at the very least, that will be implemented. Right now, we have got to regain the faith of the American people, many of whom have given up on government. They don't have any health care. They're underinsured. They're paying outrageous prices for prescription drugs. They're working for starvation wages. They're worried about climate change. Criminal justice system is a total disaster. It is racist. It is broken. We need immigration reform. We need to have the best educational system in the world. That is what we need to do. And we cannot, by the way, in my view, continue moving toward an oligarchic form of society where 3 people now own more wealth than the bottom half of America, and where, since this pandemic has begun, many billionaires are doing fantastically well, while so many workers are suffering. So when Biden becomes president, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen, trust me, on day 1, I and other members of the Congress are going to do everything we can to make sure that we have policies that reflect the needs and the pain of working families in this country.
But I wonder, Senator, how you're going to do that. You think about the Republicans. They have this Freedom Caucus, the conservative group, an organized group inside of the House to pressure the leadership. Are you thinking at all about forming a new caucus of sorts for 2021, something that's a little bit more organized than just a collection of allies?
Well, in the House, as you know, we are gaining strength. I mean, one of the things that I feel very optimistic about and very good about is, Bob, as you know, the 3 members of the so-called squad, Alexandria and Ilhan and Rashida, who were put under tremendous pressure in their reelection efforts. A lot of money was spent against them. All three of them won reelection by landslides. And we picked up already 3 strong progressives, 2 in New York, 1 in Missouri, Cory Bush in Missouri. And there are a couple of other seats out there that I think we can win. And I think now more and more members of Congress are understanding that the current structure of American society, where so few have so much and so many have so little, that where before the pandemic, half of our people were living paycheck to paycheck, and over 70 million people were either uninsured or underinsured. People understand that that type of structure for our political and economic system has got to change. So you ask me, what do? I will tell you what I do. We will work with the American people to bring forth an agenda that works for them and not just wealthy campaign contributors and the 1%. And I will tell you right now that the American people are mobilized. They're very unhappy with what's going on in this country right now, not only in terms of Trump, but in terms of what's going on in the economy. Who would have believed that in this country, the wealthiest on earth, you got millions of families struggling to put food on the table? So to answer your question, I gave a long-winded answer, I know. Bottom line, I know Ted Kaufman. I served with him in the Senate. He is dead wrong. We are going to go forward, and we are going to create policies which represent the needs of working families. And if that means substantially raising taxes on the wealthy and large corporations, cutting military spending, and doing other things that we need to find the revenue, that is exactly what we will do.
Speaking of Representative Ocasio-Cortez, should she have been given a longer speaking slot at the convention?
Well, I think there is some confusion about that. And I think the reason for the confusion has to do with the DNC and it has to do with the media. So let me tell you what happened, because it's not complicated. Bob, as you are well aware, at conventions, people who ran for president, who received a certain minimal number of votes, are entitled to have their name brought forth and have their delegates vote for them. You know, I won a number of states in this Democratic primary. And the people who supported me have a right to say, well, you know, I voted for Bernie Sanders. And that's all that this is kind of perfunctory. This is what is done in every convention. It's done in normal Republican conventions, Democratic conventions. I asked Alexandria, we were told by the Biden campaign, which was fine, that you'll have 2 1-minute slots, one to nominate you and one to second you. And we had Bob King, who's the former president of the United Automobile Workers, one of the great unions in this country, from Michigan. Bob nominated me, and Alexandria seconded me. And I think what the DNC was saying is, oh, she's speaking. No, I mean, they didn't invite her. I think they should have. That's a whole other story. They should have invited her. And more.
What's the story there?
Well, I mean, the story is they should have had more progressive speaking, giving them speaking spots. But this was just a perfunctory nomination and seconding of me, of which there was 1 minute. That's it. And she was accused of not, saying she supported Biden. She was nominating me. She is, of course, supporting Biden. So I think the confusion there rests with, I think, what the DNC was saying, and certainly media not understanding what happens at a convention.
I totally get that, Senator, but it's also a choice to give her that 1 minute nominating speech versus 6 minutes or 7 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. I gave her the 1 minute. Now, and that was my choice. If I wanted you to nominate me, I could have asked you. I could have asked anybody. I asked Bob King and Alexandria. But if your question is, should progressives, Alexandria and others, receive more time? Yes, I do think so. Absolutely.
Well, one person who got a little bit of more time was Secretary Clinton, your old rival. I heard the word billionaire. She slammed them in her speech. I just wonder what you make of her remarks and after all these years.
Well, look, Secretary Clinton and I have our differences. I thought she gave an important speech. And the importance of her speech was to say that she won. I don't know that she said this exactly, but last election, 2016, she won the popular vote by 3 million votes. And yet she lost the election because she lost a number of states by a handful of votes. And clearly, in a number of states, voter turnout was down. And her message, which is absolutely right, is we cannot sit out this election. We have got to all vote. We may have our disagreements, but everybody has got to get out and vote against somebody who I think is the most dangerous president in the modern history of our country. I think that was Secretary Clinton's point, and I think she's right.
Senator Sanders, when you're sitting up there in Vermont watching this and participating, and you see former Governor Kasich, you see a hawk and a former Bush administration official and General Colin Powell, do you believe that Republicans or more moderate voices who are maybe not full-fledged Republicans anymore, are they getting too much time? And what kind of message does that send to your own part, to Democrats nationally?
Well, Bob, as I've just said, I think we have an ascendant progressive movement. We are, I obviously lost the Democratic primary, but even in states where we lost, we won often a pretty good majority of younger people. And I'm not just talking about 30 years of age and younger, but 40, 50 years of age and younger. So I think the future of our country is with the progressive movement. And I would have liked to have seen more progressives have a chance to get up there and to talk about their vision for the future of America. On the other hand, what I would say is that, as I mentioned earlier, what we're looking at now in this unprecedented political moment in American history is a very broad, what I would call united front, for want of a better term. And that is John Kasich and I disagree on virtually everything. I like John. John's a nice guy. But we disagree politically on virtually everything, except for one thing. And that John understands that Trump is a danger to American democracy, and he is a pathological liar. And John and I agree on that. So John and I and millions of other people with very different political perspectives come together to say, look, we have to defeat Trump. And the day after Trump is defeated, you know what? John and I will have our debates about the future of America. But we do it within the context of American democracy. He supports democracy. I do. We have different points of view. We fight it out. And that's kind of what's going on now. So on one hand, you have a united front of people with very, very different points of view, including a number who have gone up and spoken at the Democratic convention. But we are united on the need to defeat Donald Trump and to elect Joe Biden. And the day after Biden is elected, you're going to see some real vigorous debate about the future of America.
Senator, we haven't discussed this next question yet, but I'm curious. You know that book, Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. If Vice President Biden wins the White House and he comes to you in a serious way and says, Senator Sanders, I know you love the Senate, you love serving in Congress, but I need you to join my cabinet. Would you take that kind of suggestion or offer seriously?
Well, it depends on a whole lot of factors. Would I give it consideration? I would give it consideration, but there are a lot of factors that would be involved. In other words, what the position was, obviously. And number two, how much latitude I would have in order to implement the policies that I think are important. So if I was simply a yes guy, no, that's not what I would do. But if President Biden were to say, Bernie, I want you, this is what you've been talking about, A, B, C, and D. I want to put you in the government to carry that out, and I'm gonna, let you do what you have to do. Well, it's another story. I would give consideration. But the other thing is, it's not just Bernie Sanders. I do believe, Bob, others have made this point. In America, we essentially have a two-party system. We have Democrats and Republicans. If you go to Europe, if you go to Canada, 50 miles away from here, you got 4 different parties. And coalition governments are not unusual. That's what happens. People disagree, but they come together in a government, and one party, the dominant party, gets 10 secretariats or agencies, and the minority party gets 4 or 5 or whatever it may be. So, it's not just me, but I would certainly like to see a President Biden understand that there are millions and millions of people in this country who want progressive change, that there are great leaders out there. they're in Congress, they're not in Congress, who could play a great role within his administration. And I would hope he would give serious thought to appointing a number of those to cabinet positions.
Final question here, Senator Sanders. You saw the news earlier today. Speaker Pelosi endorsed Representative Kennedy in that contested Massachusetts Senate primary. You've stayed out of it so far. Where are you today? Are you with Senator Markey or Representative Kennedy?
Well, Senator Markey is a good friend, and I think he has been an excellent member of the Senate, and I especially appreciate the important work that he has done on climate change, where he has been a leader in the Senate. But I am not going to get involved in every race that is out there. We kind of pick and choose, and we have worked with a number of campaigns around the country, and as of now, we're having pretty good luck in supporting progressive candidates who are winning. But that's a race that we're not involved in.
Why not? I'm just curious, the backstory there.
Well, why not that? Because there are many, many races out there, and we don't, we pick and choose the races that we choose to get involved. We have limited resources, and we do the best that we can. Just one final follow-up here, Senator. What is your outlook for the Senate next year? This is the last of your last of your last. You sound like a politician, Bob, but go for it. All right.
No, I'm just curious about the Senate. I mean, we're talking so much about the presidential race, understandably, but put aside Massachusetts. We know where you stand there now. But where is the state of the Senate campaign at this moment in terms of the progressives got disappointed in Kentucky, but where are you seeing success and perhaps disappointment elsewhere?
Well, look, I think where we're seeing success is that, based on recent polling, and who knows what tomorrow will bring, the Democrats have a good chance to regain control of the Senate. I know that Chuck Schumer is working extraordinarily hard to make that happen, and I will do everything I can to make that happen. In the House, I think you're seeing a whole bunch of really strong progressives getting elected, and I got to tell you, at the local level, in state legislatures, at the district attorney level, we're electing some strong progressives as well. So my hope is absolutely that not only that Joe becomes president, but that the Democrats gain control of the Senate and retain control of the House. And I'll do what I can to make that happen.
Senator Sanders, always good to chat. Quite a moment for you after all these years. I wrote about it earlier this week. 5 years after that announcement, even tourists, with all respect, didn't pay much attention to. What a journey. I mean, it's got to, I know I said final question, Senator, but 5 years on, it's got to, you have to be in somewhat of a reflective mood. I know you said to me, always forward, earlier this week, but what a moment for you.
Well, look, it's not, Bob, I'm not trying to be the world's most humble human being. I'm not. But nobody accomplishes anything significant by himself or herself. What we are trying to do, and what differentiates us from many other folks out there, is it's not just an election campaign. It is building a movement. So we are working not only to elect candidates, which we are with some success, we are working to build a grassroots movement of millions of working people who are prepared to stand up and fight for justice. And we are making some significant progress. So I just want to thank all of those people who are part of that movement. I'm so proud to have been able to run for president as part of that movement.
Senator, we want to thank you for your time during this busy week. We really appreciate it here at the Washington Post. Thank you.
Bob, thank you.
And thank you all for joining us for this conversation. Please hang with us. We're going to have more conversations in just a second. My colleague, Karen Tumulty, will interview House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So stay tuned.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Tumulty. I'm a columnist here at the Washington Post, and I want to thank you for joining us for our conversation today with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Welcome, Speaker Pelosi. The last time we did one of these post-live events, we were actually able to sit on the same stage. Not happening this time.
This time. No, but it's nice to be with you virtually, if not actually, Karen. Thank you, Karen, especially to be with you in this week, as this time when we're observing the centennial of women having the right to vote. You've been such a great storyteller about all of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I actually, we have a lot of news to talk about today, but I was hoping we might start by looking back. I think maybe a lot of people don't know this, but the first glimpse that much of the country got of Nancy Pelosi was back at another political convention, the 1984 Democratic Convention. You were responsible for bringing it to San Francisco. You were pretty much running it. And I remember I've read what I think was the first profile of then stay-at-home mother Nancy Pelosi. And at the end of it, they asked you, you know, do you think you might ever run for office? And you just went, oh, no. So I wanted to maybe look back at that convention. It was also remembered for a nominee who picked a woman as a running mate, something that had never happened before. But it was a very traditional, old school convention. This week has been all about innovation and creativity. So I wanted to ask you, with as many conventions as you've been to, as I've been to, do you miss the kind of physical presence of everybody being in a convention hall? Or do you see some innovations here that you think maybe the party ought to pick up in even going forward, you know, when there is not a coronavirus threat?
Well, I thank you for the question, and referencing the 1984 Connect convention in San Francisco. I was the chair of the host committee, and I can't even begin to tell you the excitement that was in that hall when Geraldine Ferraro was nominated and accepted the nomination for vice president. It was thunderous. It was thunderous. You almost thought the floor would go through the pounding that was going on. And if we were at present with each other actually this time, it would have been something similar or even more, because there's the prospect for success is even greater, although we thought we were going to win in '84. Your question is interesting because I think the convention has been superb. I think it has been excellent. And the virtual aspect of it has given it clarity and impact and a timeliness. There is nothing to substitute for the camaraderie of people seeing friends with shared values and just learning from each other in terms of successful tactics and, in fact, strategies for success. So I think the future will be a hybrid. I think that much of the program will be, again, as has presented, professionally, excellently, live, actually. It's mostly live, but it's not with a live audience. But that there will still be some opportunities for people to come together, because collaboration, whether it's collaboration among doctors and what they do, collaboration among legislators and what they do, is very important. And while we're being trained to collaborate virtually, I think that there may be some room for us to come together health-wise, safety permitting. So I say it's a hybrid in the future, but if I had to choose between the two, I would choose the virtual.
Well, what do you think I mean, tonight is the main event. Tonight is the whole purpose of this 4 days. Vice President Biden will formally accept the nomination. What do you think he really needs to do in this very, very important speech that he will be giving tonight?
Every speech by a presidential nominee is one that has to be about values and connection to the lives of the American people. Joe Biden's authenticity, his integrity, is something that comes from the heart, and the heart is where you connect with people. So certainly he will show his vision for America. He will show his knowledge and judgment on how we go forward. He will show his strategic thinking on how to get the job done. And that's all up here. But he will show his connection to people. And that is what I think is the most important purpose for tonight. Show us your vision, your knowledge and judgment, your plan to get it done, but show us what is in your heart and how that connects with my fears and hopes and aspirations and apprehensions. Joe Biden will be sitting at the kitchen table when he gives that speech tonight. The kitchen table of America's working families, not the boardroom table that the Republicans will be seated at.
Well, how did it feel for you last night to see Senator Kamala Harris, your California colleague, and the first woman of color, both Black, Asian, and an Asian American woman, accepting the nomination of your party to be vice president? What was that moment like for you? You've often said that you really look forward to the day that you will not be introduced as the most powerful woman in American history.
Well, I'm not sure how powerful the vice president is, but nonetheless, I mean,
I do shade there, but
no, it will be, that will depend on the president, and I'm sure that Joe Biden will extend to Kamala Harris the same strength that that President Obama extended to him, but that is all derivative from the President of the United States. So I'm hoping that that will be the case, and I can just do my job as Speaker and enjoy the thought that there is a vice president who is a woman of color. For me, of course, as a San Franciscan, and here we are in front of the painted women of San Francisco, the most photographed homes in America, they tell me. It's, of course, for us, it's a source of great pride. It's a sort of great confidence, too, because we know Kamala. We know how talented she is. We know how smart she is, how what a great guardian of our Constitution she is, and what a great contribution she will make to our country. For me, though, hearing her talk about her mother, I can't even talk about it now, was so beautiful because it was about her mother, yes, but it was also about the American dream. Here, this woman came at her young age to America to be involved in science, to find a cure for cancer, and at 25 years old, gave birth to Kamala Harris and conveyed to her all of the aspirations, the hopes, the optimism, the courage, the determination of a newcomer to America onto her daughter, and her father being an immigrant as well. So it was not just about Kamala Harris and her talent, and we're proud of that. It was about how she is the personification of the American dream. And that confidence that her mother instilled in her is the confidence that has taken her to the second highest office in the land.
Well, of course, there are a lot of things going on outside of this convention.
Really?
And one of the things that are really going to influence the future, if Vice President Biden is elected in the fall, is the nature of the United States Senate. And you created a bit of a sensation today when you endorsed Congressman Joe Kennedy over Senator Markey in that that Democratic primary that is coming up in Massachusetts in early September. That's not a thing you do all that often, endorsing in primaries. What made you decide to do it and do it now?
Well, I did it now because I have the time to do it. I had a moment. I mean, it's been so busy with my day job on legislation, getting ready for the convention, organizing one thing and another, supporting the Biden campaign. We had a big event on Monday in that regard. But I had, I'm very close to the Kennedy family. This convention is my 15th convention. I went to my first one when I was 12 years old. Not that long afterward, my father was the chair of the Kennedy campaign in Maryland as he was mayor of Baltimore, and so I became close to the Kennedy family from then on. And Joe Kennedy, I've served with his father, and I served with his uncle, and I served. Now I'm serving with him. No, I guess second cousin Patrick is second cousin, and now serving with him in the House. And I'm a big supporter of people in the House. You can ask my colleagues. My loyalty is to them. When Joe Kennedy came to the Congress, he brought with him a great commitment to America's working families, the courage to always act upon it, and the humility to always learn. In the 2018 election, he recognized that in others and traveled the country to help us win the House. That's why so many of our freshman members are endorsing him as well, and so many of our other members as well. I wasn't too happy with some of the assault that I saw made on the Kennedy family, and I thought, Joe didn't ask me to endorse him, but I felt an imperative to do so. And I do that with all the respect in the world for Senator Markey, whom I served with in the House before. And again, whatever the outcome is, it will be Democratic. I would probably not be getting engaged in a primary in an election where it could impact whether a Democrat or Republican could win. But this will be a Democratic seat, and I feel at peace with the decision to support the courage and the support that for my whole life the Kennedys have given me in terms of the values that have inspired me, as well as the support over time, as well as the all-out effort that Joe made to help us win the House in 2018.
You did something else this week that people might not have predicted a few weeks ago, which is you decided to bring the House back to take a look at the Postmaster General and some of these problems that we've heard about that have arisen with the post office. A lot of Democrats are warning could actually get in the way of people voting. You've had conversations with the Postmaster General. Could you tell us both the state of play here and what you think are the most urgent parts of this situation that, in your view, need to be fixed?
I thank you for that question. Yes, it was important for us to bring the House back, and I was very excited by the fact that our colleagues were so enthusiastic about coming back. In fact, they were calling me and saying, will you call us back? And of course I intended to, but I wanted to do so with their enthusiasm and exuberance behind it. The Republicans have been after the post office for a while. They like privatizing things. They don't want to have to honor labor or labor unions or diversity or any of that. And they think of it as a business. It's not called the U.S. Postal Business. It's called the Postal Service. It's a service to the American people, and overwhelmingly, it brings in a great deal of resources to cover the cost, but not all of it. So they say, well, we need to cut this and we need to cut that. No, we don't. We need to service the American people. So when this pandemic hit and we were getting complaints from veterans, think of this. Just think of some numbers. You know, I'm a numbers person. 1.2 billion prescriptions were sent through the mail in 2019. 1.2 billion prescriptions, 2019, pre-coronavirus. 80, 90 higher percent of veterans' medicine sent from the VA sent through the mail. We're getting complaints that veterans' prescriptions are late and the rest. At a time of a pandemic, at a time when people, because of health, would rather vote by mail than go to a polling place, they shouldn't have to risk their lives and their health in order to vote. That's not what a democracy is about. And so we saw a concerted effort on the part of the Republicans in the form of the Postmaster General, witting or otherwise, perhaps he's acting unwittingly, to curtail, to not increase overtime what is necessary in this intensity of the health issue and the voting issue, pulling up trucks and pulling the blue boxes of the Postal Service out of areas, taking down processing machinery in the postal system to slow down the mail. And so my challenge to them was, why are you doing this at a time of a pandemic, at a time of an election that is highly dependent on vote by mail. You hear what the president is saying, vote by mail, he votes by mail. He said, well, I don't like, what's he call it, vote by mail, I like absentee balloting. Really? Really? Yeah, we like absentee balloting too. But in order for us to protect the health of our people and the health of our democracy, we need to strengthen vote by mail, and the money that we have in our HEROES Act is to do that, but it's also to make those who want to vote in person actually have the opportunity to do so in a safe way. That means spacing, that means more polling places, more hours open, more days open, more locations, and the rest to do that. Both the vote by mail and the healthy actual voting require dollars. That is what is in our bill. But if you don't want people to vote, if you're afraid of the public, what you want to do is suppress the vote by mail and don't have the resources to have healthy voting. Isn't it strange to think that in some parts of the country, it takes about 20 minutes to an hour to vote, and in other places very near there, it will take 6, 8, 10 hours to vote because of the narrower hours, fewer polling places in the West. And many of these places, whether they're picking up the blue mailbox or they're limiting the time for voting, are in places where people of color vote. So that's why we're calling people back. I don't trust the statement. I think the Postmaster General took 3 steps forward and 1 baby step back and said, see, I'm doing something about it. No, you're not good enough. And that's not what the American people want. And let me just say this one more thing about the postal system, because this is the lifeblood. This is in the Constitution of the United States. Benjamin Franklin was the first Postmaster General. Abraham Lincoln was a postmaster. I think even Harry Truman may have been one, but he worked for the postal system. This is all American. Apple pie, motherhood, baseball, the postal system. Over 90% of the American people support the postal system. It is our connective tissue in our country. They're shredding the Constitution and they're cutting the connective tissue of our country. And the people know it and are unhappy about it. And our members are hearing from their constituents about it. That's why we're coming back. But just one more point, because numbers. They said, well, it's not efficient. It's not earning. It's paying for itself completely. Well, it's paying for itself to a large extent. But they said, what should be run more like a business? A business? No, it's a service. But would a business be able to compete if it were required, as the postal system is, to pay 75 years of its health care benefits, pay for that in a 10-year period now? What business could do that? What business could, well, the one thing we know about the postal system, the Republicans notwithstanding, we will have a postal system in 75 years. But what business could pay for its prospective 75 years of health benefits in a 10-year period? And let's take a look at their bottom line there. So this is, I'm so proud of my members. We had a call to action day on Tuesday, and over 100 members around the country had events in front of their post offices and other facilities that relate to that. And we don't want people to turn out for those because of health reasons, but nonetheless, there was great enthusiasm for all of that. So I'm proud of our members. We'll be back this weekend to vote in it, and we will have in it another number, $25 billion, in order to meet the needs of the Postal Service. This is a number that was recommended by the Board of Governors of the U.S. Postal Service. A bipartisan board of governors, 100% appointed by Donald Trump. And they recommended $25 billion. That's what's in the bill.
So your bottom line, you're saying, is $25 billion. Also, they have said they will quit doing some of the things they've done, getting rid of the boxes, getting rid of the sorting machines. Is that good enough, or are they going to have to?
No, but they're not restoring them. They have said, we're not restoring them. We're not restoring them. They've been very blatant. They said, no, we're not putting them back. We're not putting any of it back. And then another requirement that we have, which we will have in our bill, is that ballots be treated as first-class mail. We didn't plan to do that. Well, you should. Well, if it costs money, we'll give you some to do that. The important piece of mail, ballot, the vote.
So, you are an organizer at the center of your soul. What do you think the party needs to do, though, given the hostility that the president and the Republicans are trying to build toward voting by mail? We heard Michelle Obama say, if you have to get to the polls physically, pack a lunch, pack a dinner. Do you feel like the Democratic Party, against these forces that you are up against, is it equipped to get your voters to the polls?
Well, you referenced at the beginning that I was chair of the host committee for the 1984 convention and got the convention to San Francisco. Then I was chair of the California Democratic Party. And so now I'm wearing my party hat. And as I told the Postmaster General, I could be seen dragging bags of mail, political mail, down the street at midnight to get in before the post office closed, to sit there all night to make sure that the mail went out in a timely fashion. So they've come into my wheelhouse on this. And I will say this, Karen, we don't agonize, we organize. We will have the votes to win the election because everything is at stake in this election. No matter how many obstacles they put up to participation, because they are afraid of the American people. So what I loved about Michelle's speech is it was so inspirational and so values-based, and yet it was so practical in the end to say, bring a dinner and a breakfast in case you have to wait all night to vote, because that's the way they have insisted in certain communities in our country. But we will, the advice I would give, and Eric Holder gives this as he manages this issue from his perspective as a former Attorney General, have a plan. What is your plan to vote? Make a plan right now, and make that plan be that you are going to vote early, because they will do everything, including slowing down the mail or having mail that is not first class, they call postage paid, tucked into a corner. Suspect the worst, because they've already demonstrated that's what they have in store. But again, we don't agonize, we organize, and we are organizing right now. And again, some of us have sprung from organizing in the party. That is me. I'm one of them, as former chair, long time, Northern chair, state chair, the rest of it. And not only did we stay up all night dragging the mail down the street, we stayed up all night making sure that the mail got through the printing press in a timely fashion, because time, it's about time. Time is important, and that's what the Postal Service leadership, well, that one person, is trying to take away from us, the time to vote, to have votes count as cast.
Well, with the time we have left, I think I'd like to get to the other issue that I think is front and center for everybody in this country, which is coming up with some kind of relief for what so many Americans are suffering amid this coronavirus pandemic. And Congress and the House and the Senate and the White House, you all seem kind of stuck here. What are the hopes of actually getting some kind of relief out of Washington that Americans across the country right now really, really need?
Well, we put forth our proposal 97 days ago, the HEROES Act. It did three things: heroes, honor our heroes, our healthcare workers, our first responders, our transportation, our sanitation, our food suppliers, our teachers, our teachers, our teachers. Secondly, it was to open up our economy by crushing the virus, being able to open our economy safely and send our children to school safely. Those provisions are in our legislation. Third, putting money into the pockets of the American people. 97 days ago. There are only 75 days until the election, so we're farther away from when our bill went forward. About a few weeks ago, the Republicans, Mitch McConnell said, we have to press the pause button. He forgot to tell the virus. He forgot to tell unemployment. He forgot to tell the person collecting rent that there was a pause. And what happened in that time? Millions more people have become infected. Tens of thousands more have died because he pressed the pause button. Could we have saved them all? No, but many, yes. So we have there the essence of it, and we don't necessarily have shared values with the Republicans. They don't want to let the states go bankrupt. What did the president say? Testing is irrelevant. Tracing, they say, is not that important, but that's not what the scientists tell us. So we need a science-based testing, treating, mask wearing, distancing, sanitation. Wash your hands. Not like Pontius Pilate, as they are doing, but wash your hands to protect yourselves and your families and those with whom you come in contact. So there's a path. And of course, in it, we say we're there to protect the lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy. And in there, we have the funding for voting in a safe way. We have our funding for the post office, which they have resisted. And we have funding for food, which is a big difference between what we have. Well, you be the judge. We have over $60 billion to address the food insecurity, especially among our children. Over $60 billion. They have $250,000. So you know why we have a big distance. But we will find agreement because we must. And we must do it in a way that, again, crushes the virus, honors our heroes, puts money in the pockets of the American people, keeps our democracy healthy, and again, protects our postal system. And the safety of our workers.
But you've been in negotiations with the White House team. How long has it, are you talking to Mitch McConnell? How long has it been since you've talked to the president on all of this? How does this get unstuck?
Never told him. I never told him about this. He has sent his representatives, and if he trusts them, that they represent him, then that's who we negotiate with. Mitch McConnell has been very clear to me. I'm not doing anything that the president doesn't want. And what the president wants is the stock market to succeed, as we all do. And that's why they're spending trillions of dollars to shore up the money markets, the credit markets, and all, so that the stock market thrives. And again, that's good for our economy, but we think trillions of dollars should be spent to buoy up America's working families as well. And that's why we have a difference of priorities here. But we will come to agreement because we must. And we do not agree, subscribe to what Mitch McConnell says, let state and local governments go bankrupt. Go bankrupt? Healthcare workers, I mentioned them. And if they get fired, they go on unemployment insurance. When they get fired, not only do they lose their jobs in the public sector, the private sector loses jobs too in the communities in which they live. So let's listen to some of the economists and even the chairman of the Fed. Chairman of the Fed that practically wanted to introduce Congress to state and local government, whose fiscal soundness is important to the economic soundness of our country. But they thought, let the states go bankrupt. Really? But that's one of the differences between Democrats and Republicans. But in the Congress, in the country, Democrats and Republicans are advocating for funding for state and local government because they know that's where the delivery of service is to the American people. And again, that advocacy will bear fruit, I'm absolutely certain.
Do you think there's an element here of the president wanting to punish cities because they're primarily Democratic or blue states? That, I mean, is this an ideological issue with the president and with the Senate Majority Leader, or is it a political issue?
Well, I think it's both. I think the president is political. I mean, he doesn't even keep it a secret. He is blatant in saying that he's not going to be bailing out blue states or whatever. However, it's interesting that you asked the question in the way you did, political ideological, because when I asked the Secretary of the Treasury, why is it that you will not support state and local government? How come you don't understand the strength of that to our communities? Democratic and Republican governors, mayors, county executives, etc., are urging us to support the state and local government. He said, and finally one day he said, well, it's kind of a taxation issue. I said, a taxation issue? Why is that? He said, well, there's some people in some states who don't think that they should be taxed and pay money to pay for needs in other states. Oh, really? Welcome to the United States of America. Have you ever heard of Katrina, Ike, Maria, storms in North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, Joplin, Missouri, other places around, Sandy? Of course, Meadows didn't vote for Sandy, so that shows you where they're coming from. But the very idea that they would suggest states like California and New York, which put much more money into the Treasury than we get out, and they're saying states don't think they should help. Well, let me say, whatever, shall we say, lack of validity that may have had, when you're talking about a pandemic, it knows no borders. So it is even less sensible, sane, and American.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker Pelosi, for being with us today. It is always great to have you, and we hope you'll be back soon.
I'd love to. Thank you, and thank you for your attention to women getting the right to vote, not given, fighting for, struggling for. When they say given, not so. Winning the right to vote. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are hoping that our viewers will be back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock when my colleague Jonathan Capehart will be here along with some of my colleagues on the reporting side and some of our columnists to wrap up tonight's events at the convention and the convention itself. And of course, next week, we're going to do it all over again here at Post Live at the Republican convention. So please take a look at our website and sign up for some of the terrific events that we'll be having.